Another topic Cinda talked about is climate. It probably is more of an issue if you're going to be growing crops, but it certainly is an issue, and it was an issue for me. But one of the reasons I started looking for land in this part of the country is I knew it was a bit less snowy than the Sandpoint area, and summers were longer. I wanted a 6 to 7 month grazing season. When I ran the numbers on making this a profitable business, it was going to be tough to do in Sandpoint, where the season was 5 months, 5 months grazing season. So that's what I wanted, and that's what I found here. However, like Cinda said, I laughed when she said it, that the books say that Moscow area is supposedly actually zone 6, 5, 4. In reality, I have bought so many young trees and shrubs, landscaping in the area, and they've died. So now I'm down to, okay, this is a zone 2 or 3. And it's been a very expensive education. But I guess all I'm saying is definitely check out all of the resources you can, but do not neglect to go talk to your neighbors. And this is something I did look with every property I was seriously interested in buying. Go talk to the neighbors, because that's where you get the real skinny. You know, what do you grow in your garden? Do you ever get tomatoes to ripen here? Those kind of good questions. How many cuttings of hay do you get? Oh, how long is the grazing season? Neighbors are just a wealth of information when you're shopping for property. Send the next slide. The next resource that's really a major point, certainly if you're going to be raising livestock, is buildings. Buildings are huge. Now, I had intended to spend basically all my money on the land. That was my plan. And so I just wanted some kind of decent house that I could work on over the time. I definitely wanted south-facing house and garden, and just one decent barn, please. Well, I found this house that's, very livable, and it had 10 outbuildings. And I just flipped when I saw that, because if anybody has ever priced building a barn or a shed, it's just phenomenally expensive. It's prohibitive. Now, the building on the lower left is what I call the sheep barn. That one is about 24 by 60, and the sheep are only in it for 2 months out of the winter. As soon as they get shorn during their lambing season, and then they're back out into the woods. But it's big enough to store a good part of the hay plus the animals. Then there's another barn that's 64 by 32. That old red one is the third barn, and then there's 7 other buildings. And I just cannot tell you how thrilled I was. And I use every one of these buildings. It's been a huge boon. It's a huge plus on a piece of property. Next slide, Cinda. The next resource, if you're going to be raising livestock, of course, is fencing. Sheep are one of the hardest things to keep in, after probably goats. They're probably the second hardest. I was hoping to at least get something, so I'd have some kind of fencing on the spot, so I could have some way to contain the sheep initially. Well, forget it. Out of the whole 65-acre, there were 2 short perimeter fences that were old, ratty barbed wire. And a neighbor advised me, and I'm forever grateful to him, to start out with portable electric fencing. 3 strands. You see those 3 black reels in the upper picture. He advised me to use it to shore up my poor fences, and also use this as test fencing before I spent 1 penny building permanent fencing. And he was so right about that. And that's what I did. I started out, I bought it from, I bought mine from Gallagher. Premier is another excellent online source. They have a catalog for fencing materials. I think actually Premier is a little better than Gallagher. I now have 5 of these sets of 3 reels that I use all over the property. And I'm slowly changing everything over to permanent field fencing, as in the bottom picture. That's 32 inches of field fencing with 1 strand of electric on top. And that serves two purposes. It keeps the tall animals, like horses and cattle, from reaching over to the, of course, much greener grass on the other side. And it moves electricity across the property where I want it to be. The middle picture, unfortunately, you can't see it real well, but the ratty barbed wire fences in the background, and in the foreground is this 3-strand electric with portable posts. And I used that until it was just 2 summers ago. So it was for 12 years that reinforced that fence, and it kept everybody in. It was just 2 years ago that I finally got around to replacing that fence. I urge everybody who's going to be raising livestock to get some of this fencing. They also sell something called wire mesh. It's much, much more expensive, not as easy to move, and certainly if you're working with larger acreages, it's difficult. Next slide, Cinda. I'm kind of whizzing through here, but I'm trying to keep my talk under 30 minutes, so Jessica has time because she has a great talk to give too. Another resource is labor. This is a one-person operation, but the way I've designed it, a few times a year I do need help. Initially, where do you find help in a new town? Initially, I called job service, and I got some good young men. Then my best bet was putting up flyers in the high school and the feed stores. And for most of the last 15 years, I've had a series of high school boys who work with me for 2 or 3 or 4 years, and then one of the requirements is before they graduate and leave me, they have to bring in somebody else to replace them, a younger boy. So that has been my labor, and I only really need it for fence building. That's the biggie, digging post holes and lugging heavy things around. Shearing day definitely requires labor. I like to have a crew of 10 people. Now, all these women that you see standing around, that's 1 year's worth of growth from a sheep, and that's called a skirting table, and they're picking out little bits of hay and manure from the fleece. The one on the far left is paid. I have one paid person every year who knows what she's doing. Everybody else there is a volunteer who came for the experience. They all spin wool, they're spinners, and they want to know how it works. They want to know the entire process of wool from the sheep's back to the sweater that they made. And for the last 7, 8 years, my entire shearing crew has been volunteers like these great women. So that is something you can think about when you think about your operation. Are there other people who want to learn about what it is I'm doing? That was part of my model from the beginning, and it's definitely been helpful to me, and of course having this website that is, and I'll talk about this much later in marketing, but you know, some of these people came from 4 hours drive away to get here, and they found me on the web, on the internet. So that's how I deal with shearing labor. I do hire a professional shearer, of course. I mean, that's a huge job. Apprentices. Thanks to the Cultivating Success program, I have been hosting apprentices for 7 years now, and it's been a wonderful experience. The girl in the bottom picture is Addie Rose. She came out from Massachusetts to spend 3 months with me during lambing season, and she was my first one, and every year since then I've had 1 or 2 apprentices, and it's been a wonderful experience. I've thoroughly enjoyed it, but I'm here to tell you it's not a way to get free labor. You work for that labor. They're there to learn, you know, and you have to spend time teaching, and you have to be willing to want to do that. I am, as it's worked out, I've loved doing it, but frankly, I did have the mistaken idea initially that I would get some free labor, and I learned very quickly that's not quite how it works. For example, trimming hooves, this is the example I love to give. Once a year or 2, sheep need to have their hooves trimmed. And normally, I will hire somebody or cajole a friend to come out, and we'll grab each animal, they hold her head, and I trim her hooves. It takes about 4 hours. This happened 2 years in a row with 2 apprentices helping me and learning how to do it. It took 8 hours to do the same number of sheep. I was almost dead. My back was killing me. they had a wonderful time. And I think the reward for me was when it was all over, it was so amazing to see how proud they were and how confident they were when they had been so terrified just a few hours earlier. So anyhow, that's the labor. That's all I'm going to say about labor. Cinda, next slide. I'm trying to keep this fairly short. Equipment. I have never wanted to have a lot of equipment. I honestly don't like machines. I don't want to mess with them, and I don't like maintaining them. This is one of the things I learned about myself, just like I don't want to do accounting. You know, we're all different. I don't like messing with machines. So I started out with an ATV that I did everything with, and a lawnmower. First it was a push lawnmower, then I graduated to self-propelled, and then riding lawnmower. And finally, about 7 years ago, I was ready to buy a tractor that did all of that stuff and more. But, so anyhow, my point is what? Yeah. You can do a lot with a minimal amount of equipment. You really can. And then when the time is right, the money's available, then you can upgrade. And by the way, this is the 32 horses, probably the smallest tractor I would want for this job. I can carry a 1,000-pound bale, but it's a little bit scary because it's a pretty lightweight tractor. Like everybody else, I've never talked to anybody who owns a tractor who didn't say, oh, if I just had a little bit bigger one, I could fill in the blanks. You people who have tractors out there know just what I'm talking about. Okay, Cindy, you're hurrying me along. You're right. The market. Before I decided to purchase this place, I did some research on the possible market. My market is about a 250-mile radius. I liked the fact that there were 2 universities nearby. I have found business not so much from the students, but from faculty and staff. There are 2 meat processors nearby. That's important. And this is also, if you're going to have livestock, there's a sale yard 50 miles away, because you're not always able to direct market every single animal you may want to. So that's a backup. And I knew I would have a nationwide market for my wool sales through the website, and it's turned out that that's also how I market everything I raise. But again, it's just something to look at. Next slide, Cinda. How are you going to market whatever this thing is you're going to raise or grow? Now, I made a map of this looks funky, but I made a map early on, the first year I got here, and all those dotted lines are where I had planned to put fencing, where I did put fencing. Like I say, it's funky. The house is in the upper right-hand corner. It's that black rectangle. And as I was doing this, I measured most of the distances, so when it came time to buy fencing, I was ready. But this took place before there was even Google Maps, before it was available. And interestingly, I, of course, have gone to Google Maps since then, and I'm shocked at how accurate this is, just from walking on the ground compared to the satellite view. But anyway, this has been a tremendous help to me to sit in the living room with a cup of coffee and visualize and plan over the years what I'm going to do, improvements that I'm going to make. Please do some kind of map.